Okay, welcome to another in our series of using schedules and task analysis for increased independence. This part of our distance learning series is sponsored by the Department of Special Education, specifically our Family Support Center. And we're thankful to our County Board of Education for all of their involvement in all of our activities. So we want you to have the opportunity to ask questions. Clicking on the chat feature, which is down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, is where you may type your questions. We will gather all those questions, and hopefully with our small audience tonight, we'll be able to answer those questions live here in the webinar. If not, we will follow up for you. Okay, we're going to get started by taking steps to prepare us for this evening's presentation. We want to create an interactive, informative, and engaging session. And we'll ask you to complete a brief writing activity. So if you quickly gather paper and a writing instrument, or be prepared to use your device to type a written response. And we'll be asking for your input several times in the chat. So the first thing we want you to do is find the chat and let us know who you are and what your relationship to PGCPS is. And also let us know what level your child is. Are they elementary, pre-K, middle, or high school? So if you just want to find the chat and let us know. Okay, I don't see any responses in the chat, so if you have trouble, oh, we have a parent for grade 1, great. And if you can't find the chat, you can certainly go ahead and unmute. We have a small enough group this evening. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Miss Yvette Young from our Family Support Center.
Forgot to unmute. Good evening, everyone. And it's exciting to present tonight's session on creating schedules and task analysis. We're going to talk about creating those schedules and how those schedules can be beneficial in your everyday activities. So by the end of the session, participants will be able to create a daily schedule for the students, adapt the schedule according to the students' individual needs, and use the schedule to manage challenging behaviors. So why use a schedule? Schedules influence a child's emotional, cognitive, and social development. Research has demonstrated that there are these benefits with using a schedule. Research also shows that activity schedules can be a useful tool in prompting independence for students. An activity schedule does not limit its use to a specific age range, diagnosis, or intellectual functioning, but can be adapted to accommodate a variety of types of individuals. So we all use a schedule, and we'll see how it's going to benefit us in particular. A lot of times you'll hear the terms routines and schedules used interchangeably, but actually there is a difference. Schedules represent the big picture, the main activities to be completed daily, while routines represent the steps done in order to complete that schedule. We're going to focus on schedules tonight. How can schedules help? Well, schedules help us by improving our organization of our daily activities. They provide support for individuals to remember and figure out what to do by just looking at the schedule. It helps them stay organized. It decreases their anxiety and when their routine is disrupted. It eases their transition from one activity to the next because they'll know what's expected by looking at the schedule. It decreases the frequency of meltdowns because of that predictability that comes along with it, and decreases inattentiveness and off-task behavior. Schedules also are helpful because they provide structure and consistency. They create predictability so that not everything has to be a surprise. It teaches independence, teaches students how to break tasks down to manageable chunks, and establishes reasonable expectations for what can be accomplished in a given period of time. It teaches sequencing and order of events. So students can benefit from using a schedule because it helps them feel more secure. It's an important piece that teaches that child. It's important for you to remember to teach the child how to use the schedule, and to reinforce using the schedule in order for it to work to its maximal effectiveness. So who benefits from using a schedule? You do, we all do. If this is you and you've repeated the same instructions so many times and it feels like you're at Groundhog Day, your student may need a virtual schedule or a task analysis checklist, and we're going to talk more about that as we proceed.
All right, so different types of schedules are appropriate for different tasks, as well as for different types of students. Depending on the task or schedule, you may need a simple all-day schedule to outline the classes for the day. On your other hand, you may need to chunk those schedules into different times of the day if your student can't think long-term for the whole day. And not all students can use the same types of schedules. Students who are young or have reading difficulties may need a visual schedule to help them organize their day. Students who are older or who can read more fluently may be able to have a picture with words or phrases. You need to decide what can work for your child and your family. You want the schedule to be something that's easy to use and can be used independently, if not right away. Like Yvette talked about teaching how to use those schedules, then eventually. And one thing we want to emphasize here is that schedules don't have to be fancy. Look around your house. Are there things in your house that can be used to create a schedule? Or are there inexpensive things that you can purchase to make a schedule? And involve your student in making that schedule. Let them take ownership of it so that when you use it, it's more effectively used. And what we also want to emphasize is that the first thing you try may not always fit. This is new for everybody, distance learning, for teachers, for parents, for students, for administrators. Trial and error is going to be present in a lot of the things that families are doing, and a schedule isn't any different. So you may find that you thought your child would work most easily with an online schedule, but then has difficulty accessing and using it. So you may have to move to a paper schedule with or without pictures. So the first type of schedule we're going to look at is a visual schedule. You'll see an example of it here on the slide, and a visual schedule is a tool for keeping students engaged. It has many purposes, some of which Yvette already talked about. It allows a student to grow in independence, as well as it increases their ability to engage in keeping to the schedule. Yvonne will talk more about prompting and prompt dependence later in the presentation, but visual schedules are great tools for allowing students to become less reliant on those prompts and navigate the school schedule more independently. So here we have types of visual schedules: vertical, horizontal, and we'll show some pictures in the next couple slides. Static, removable, computer schedules. And here are some commonly used materials: Velcro, envelopes, laminators, sleeve protectors, folders, printers, pictures or symbols. I particularly like the sleeve protectors because you can use either a dry erase or a wet erase marker on them, and you can change it over the day if you need to. So here are just some different programs that make symbols on the computer. There's Board Maker. Some of you might be familiar with Picture Exchange Communication Symbols, or PECS. always Google Images, or I really like using photographs that are specific to the student or specific to the student's interest. I know that in our planning for these sessions, we talked a lot about superheroes and how fond most kids are of superheroes. So things that are something that will engage your child. And here are just some examples of those visual schedules. You'll see one that simply has 2 columns, to do and done, and then one that has the pictures that you can move up and down to show what time in the schedule there are. Some students use binders for schedules. Some use whiteboards with magnets that you can use. But like we said, it doesn't have to be fancy. It can be just something that you create and print at home or even draw at home. Couple of more, you'll see some board maker or picture exchange communication symbols here, and the Velcro on that one on the bottom left. I've seen folks use plastic baggies for pictures. Let's try that again. For your older kids or your kids who are more fluently in reading, a colored word schedule is something you can use. You can see where they've kind of scheduled out the whole day here from wake up to bedtime. Some students can only handle it in chunks, so you might half this or separate it by school, and then what happens at home if your child's having a hard time separating those 2 things because they're in the same spot right now. And a schedule isn't always static or set. Oftentimes we think of a schedule as something that tells us, okay, at 8 o'clock, we're gonna go here, 9 o'clock, we're gonna go here, 10 o'clock here. But a schedule can often be something that helps your child move throughout the day. The suggestion you see on the screen now came from a parent in one of our earlier sessions. It allows the student to move Post-it notes from section to section to indicate where he or she needs help and what he or she is in the process of doing at the time. And I kind of stole this and I'm using it as my schedule in my office. So these help adults and kids. All right, so we want to know, is the schedule you currently use working well if you are using a schedule? And if not, what are the challenges? And instead of using the Jamboard, you can just go ahead and put it in the chat, or you can unmute. That way we don't have to toggle back and forth between programs. So if you'd like to share, you can. I know for me, I started out using a computer schedule with my calendar, and I quickly realized that with all the distractions at home, I had to have it written out in front of me. And so now I have a whiteboard that has that kind of chart of what I've done, what I need to do, what I need to do next, and what's done. So if you want to share in the chat or unmute, please do. So Valerie said, I think our schedule is working out pretty well. She likes the idea of a color-coded schedule. It sounds more fun and engaging. And that really is the point, to make it so that your child is motivated to use that schedule. Anyone have any particular challenges with schedules? Is there anyone that's not using a schedule at all, perhaps? Okay, if you like, you can continue to share in the chat or raise your hand within the participant window and we can call on you to unmute. I am going to go ahead. Someone said, oh, somebody did write in the chat, no schedule. She has one task and a break, and then the next task and a break. Okay, so how do you get your child to follow a schedule? That may be even more difficult than creating the schedule, right? So you'll want to explain that schedule to your child. Show your child how it can be used. We've talked in our previous sessions about the fact that oftentimes we'll tell our child the end game, right? I want your room clean. We don't tell them the 12 things that need to happen to make that happen with room clean. And oftentimes our kids can't see the end. And so if you show them how it'll be used more effectively. One of our parents did say, task break, task break. That's great. Prioritizing those activities and allowing for some downtime. You'll want to limit your verbal prompts. Remind them to reference their schedule when they don't know what to do next, because of course it's your first say, oh, nope, you have science next. Make sure they're looking at that schedule so that they can use it without you once you step back. And praise them for following that schedule. Like any new tool, students need to be taught how to follow a schedule and then reinforced when they are using it. But we said earlier, not all schedules are going to work the first time. And if your schedule doesn't work, go back and look at what you did with that schedule. Did you instruct them on how to use it? Are there things that are distracting, that are impeding on the following of the schedule? In other words, is there a TV in the same room? Is there another child doing distance learning in the same room? Are there things in the outside environment? Is it the demand on the schedule itself that's causing the student not to follow, or is it an undesirable task that the student doesn't want to do? All right, we had someone say, I like the idea of downtime, but his teacher has them in front of the computer from 8 to 11, and that's quite a stretch. Specials are usually normally in the morning, which breaks it up. This is where you have to have a very honest conversation with your teacher, because maybe they don't realize that at certain points within there, your student needs a break. And if you communicate that to the teacher, that could be something that they could build into that schedule. Everybody needs a break at some point. 3 hours is a long time to be in front of a computer. All right, Yvonne, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to let you introduce doing this activity with the video clips.
All right.
Marcy, this is Beth. I also wanted to mention to Ms. Williams, if frequent breaks is a part of your child's IEP, then that's something that should be included in their school day.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing. We're going to watch a few video clips on schedules. So using the worksheet that, if you look in your chat in the beginning, there is a link that has all the forms and the worksheets that we're going to be utilizing tonight. So using the worksheet that has a category and 4 videos, you can also use your own paper to take down some notes while we watch the video. So while you're watching the video, please use the worksheet to indicate what can be changed, what the parent or the guardian should have done differently to increase the child's success in utilizing the schedule. So we're going to start with the first video.
Hold on one second. Let me make sure I'm sharing my sound as well. Okay, can you see the video screens?
Yes.
Great. All right, so we'll go ahead and watch this first video.
Can I have a brownie?
Oh, not right now, honey. All right, it's lunchtime.
But why?
Because it's lunchtime. It's not time for brownies.
Open it.
I said it's not time for brownies.
Open it.
Don't.
Open it.
All right, you can have one brownie. That's it now.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a moment and complete the worksheet, and then we can have a discussion. All right, so you can either in the chat, or you are welcome to unmute yourself as we discuss this first video. What are some things that the parent could have done differently to have made the child understand what the expectations were at that moment? Okay, so Ms. Williams mentioned a first then schedule would have been appropriate. Absolutely. Also, we didn't even see a schedule. Anything that the parent could have referred the child to, what was happening and how long they had to wait before they got their snack. Any other things that the parent could have done differently? Okay, so Marcy, we'll move on to the next video.
Listen, buddy, we have to run some errands, okay? Need you to get your coat and your shoes on, okay? Hurry up.
Okay, so in the chat, referencing back to the first video, that the parent could have presented a schedule symbol for snack so that the child knows when snack time was going to be happening. So with this video, it's the dressing distraction video is what they call it. What are some things that the parent could have done differently? And so we're looking at the categories. Could the parent change the time of the demand, which was the instruction to put on their coat? Could they have used a fun activity to reward the child? Could they have avoided certain situations or people? And how could they control the environment if those were options? What are your thoughts? Again, you can unmute yourself or you can put the answers in the chat. So Ms. Williams mentioned a fun activity, maybe start sooner so she doesn't not have to rush. Absolutely. That's a great suggestion. So really looking at changing the time. Any other thoughts? So the parent could have also controlled the environment, right? The parent could have controlled the environment by turning the TV off until the child put on the coat. The parent could have also changed the time that that request was made. So the parent could have had the little boy put on the coat early before the TV is turned on. So at that point, the TV wouldn't be a distraction. So by putting on the coat and then the TV would be turned on. The parent could have also used the first then board, as another parent had mentioned earlier, is first put on your coat and then you can have the TV. All right, Marcy, we'll watch the third video.
Okay, buddy, listen, we have to get ready for school, all right? So I want you to clean all this up, okay? Mm-hmm. right, we're gonna have to do it later. Come on. Come on, let's go. Come on.
So what are your thoughts on this video? In the video, we didn't even see the parent present any type of a prompt or a schedule to indicate that what the child was expected to do. It seemed like the parent was also rushing the child, and so there was no time to complete it. The other thing that I noticed in the video is that the parent didn't follow through with the directions. So the child didn't know what the sequence of events were going to occur. Anything else that you guys noticed? All right, we're gonna watch our last and final video.
All right, buddy. Come on, enough with the DS. Come on. Come on, enough with the DS. We've been playing it a long time now. Hey, it's time to brush your teeth. It's time to brush your teeth. Okay, you know what?
Give it back!
You know?
Give it back! Give it back! Give it back!
Watching this video is very typical. That probably is something that all of you have experienced in your household. What are your thoughts on what the parent could have done as it relates to setting a schedule and allowing the child to have some predictability? There's too much negotiation. He should have had a time to turn off the tablet and maybe an alarm. Absolutely. Using those auditory reminders is also just as important. So a lot of parents use timers or clocks and pair it with their schedule so that if the child is able to tell time, then they're able to relate the schedule to when an activity should be occurring. So absolutely, it was a lot of negotiation going on there. Anything else? So looking at one of our checklist items, a fun activity and then a reward. So the parent could have suggested first brush your teeth, then video game. Going back to our first then strategy, first this and then that. The parent could have also changed how they asked, how the demand was presented to the child. So maybe offer a choice. And really looking at our tone. So the way that the parent also presented it was a more of a harsher tone, and it was more of a strict demand. And so maybe the parent could have stayed a little bit more neutral when presenting the request to the child, as well as possibly establishing a routine where the child brushes their teeth first and then the game comes after. Any other thoughts before we move on? So when you're developing your schedules, there's several things that you want to keep in mind. You want to consistently keep a wake up and bedtime routines. Our Wednesday schedules are a lot flexible for our students. And so it's very easy for us to go off track in the middle of the week. But just remember that those routines that they're engaging in Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, that you're keeping those routines consistent, even on days that they don't have virtual learning. This includes their break times while being flexible with the schedule. things change. Your child may feel a little bit more tired one day versus the other. It's happened in my household with my second grader, and just being flexible with that schedule. It also teaches our kids how to adapt to changes in the schedule. So provide flexibility in that schedule. Also make time for family activities, such as games, going for a walk, going for a bike ride. That's also very important to include in your schedules. Don't forget to reinforce desired activities and for the child completing the task. So if the child completes the task to the best of their ability, whether it's prompted or unprompted, you want to make sure that you're reinforcing so that you can increase the future occurrence of that behavior, which is following the schedule and completing the routines. Before we move on to task analysis, does anybody have any questions about schedules, use of schedules, how to create a schedule? We're going to be sharing the presentation with everyone at the end, and it would also be posted in the Family Support Center website, as well as our YouTube channel. Okay, so we're going to move on to task analysis. So for those of you who may have attended our previous webinar at the beginning of the school year, we had briefly touched on task analysis, where we talked about creating a task analysis for virtual learning. So we're going to take some time and really dive a little bit deeper into what a task analysis is, how do you create it, how do you prompt, and how do you increase learning and independence. So a task analysis breaks down a skill or a behavior into manageable parts or steps. Not sure how many of you have heard of chaining. So chains are skills and behaviors that can be broken down and occur in a sequence. So a task analysis allows you to put those chains down into those teachable steps so that you can work on teaching the skills in the sequential order. So the first step in creating a task analysis is to select the targeted skill or the behavior that you want to teach. So you want to teach hand washing, that would be the skill. You want to identify the prerequisite skills as well as the materials that you may need to teach that skill. Third, break down the skill into steps. You want to make sure that all of the steps that are required to complete the skill have been covered. And then you want to decide how you're going to teach your child the skill. And we'll talk a little bit later about how to prompt when we're teaching a chain. Then you want to implement the task analysis. As always, with any skill that you're teaching, you want to monitor to see if your child is making progress. Are they learning? Are they learning? Are they making progress slower compared to other skills that you've taught in the past? Then you want to look at other variables. Is it how I'm teaching? Are the materials that I'm using effective, and are they learning from it? This is a sample of a task analysis. It almost looks like a schedule a little bit, but thinking about a task analysis breaks down a skill. So this is a skill of getting dressed. The child may not know the sequence in getting dressed. So they may put their pants on first before they put on their underwear. So this task analysis includes some visual supports as well. And it goes in the sequence that you're going to teach that child and the sequence that the child is going to get dressed. Another example of a task analysis for washing hands. This task analysis has 11 steps. If someone else creates it, they may only have 8 because the child has mastered some of the steps within the task analysis. So when you develop that task analysis, it's based on the steps that your child is not independent with. So any steps that your child is independent with, they're expected to engage in that step, but it may not be a step that you're going to teach systematically. You're going to work on the other steps that they're not independent with. So now we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna create a task analysis. If you were present at our last webinar, we created a task analysis for washing hands. This time, we're getting a little bit more advanced. We're gonna ask you to create a task analysis for putting on a coat. So in the link, again, there are some blank task analysis forms, or if you just want to use your own paper to create one for putting on the coat. We're going to take about 2.5 minutes to work on this task. All right, our time is up. So in the chat, how challenging was it to create this task analysis for putting on a coat? Or you can unmute yourself to talk. Does anybody want to share what they created? The steps that they included in their putting on the coat task analysis? Creating a task analysis can be very challenging. I've done many as a teacher and as a behavior analyst, and the first time you do it is not always, it doesn't always work. Sometimes it takes several attempts and rewriting of your task analysis to almost make it perfect. And so the next slide is just one way of how those steps would have been written down in a task analysis format. And again, people put on coats differently, and also thinking about the coat may have a hoodie. And there's been many times that I've had to prompt students to take the hoodie out from the inside of their coat. Some coats may come with belts. So as you're writing your task analysis, you really want to think about what are the materials, what are the supplies that my child has, and what are some obstacles that they may encounter. And so within that task analysis, you may want to include some of those obstacles and how they problem solve doing it. Because if the belt gets stuck in the coat, then it may impact the rest of the steps of them completing the task independently. So really think about how you would do it, run that task analysis, have somebody else go through it to make sure that it makes sense. From our previous webinar, we showed the video of the kids teaching their dad how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and it was an absolute failure of how it was presented. And so how you write it and how you teach it is very, very important. So now we're going to talk about prompting, which is how do you teach that skill? Whether it is following a schedule, running a task analysis with a chain, or any skill, prompting is really how you teach the skill and how you increase that child's independence in completing that skill. So prompts are instructions, they can be gestures, demonstrations, or other things that we arrange in the environment or that we do to increase the likelihood that a child will make the correct response. Prompts are a form of assistance, and typically an adult provides that assistance, but other children can prompt, other children. Siblings can prompt their brothers or sisters in learning and in teaching them a skill. So they're assistance that are provided before the learner attempts to engage in that skill. This is just a really great visual of how we can prompt. So we can prompt using most to least, or we can prompt using least to most. It really depends on the skill that you're teaching, the environment that you're in, as well as the child's preference. There are some children who do not like to be touched. And so providing that physical guidance is actually even more aversive for them. And so you really want to think about all of those situations, as well as the environment. If you are in the community, you may want to not use most to least. You're going to probably use least to most prompting so that it's not stigmatizing for the child and that you are not drawing attention to the child in the community. So really thinking about how you're going to prompt, whether you're going to use most to least or least to most. And it doesn't have to go in the order of, I'm going to go from verbal to physical. You can start at any point in the prompt hierarchy. So you can start with a gestural prompt and then go to visual, modeling, or physical, and physical being the most intrusive prompt. Has any parents utilized, are you aware of specific prompts that work best for your child? You can share in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Okay. This is just another visual of the prompt hierarchy. And one of the things that as a parent or as a teacher, you always want to wait. You want to give the child the time, the opportunity to respond. And these are some strategies that you can use, starting from the least intrusive to the most intrusive being that physical prompt. So you provide the direction, you're going to give an expectant look by providing the child time to respond. Oftentimes we are ready to provide the verbal prompt again, the instruction again. We want to give that child enough time to process that verbal direction or that instruction before we represent the directions or we move on to a more intrusive or invasive prompt. So the expectant pause doesn't work, it's not effective, then you may move on to an indirect verbal prompt. So this is typically the use of body language. So you may give a facial expression like, I'm waiting, I need a response from you. Wait a little bit, that's not effective, then you go down the hierarchy. An indirect verbal prompt, you may use an open-ended question, such as, what should we do now? If you're looking at the child's schedule and they're standing there and they're not moving through their schedule, a prompt may be, what should you be doing now? Instead of saying, it's time for X. That's giving them more of a prompt. So if that indirect verbal prompt is effective, then that's what you would go to. If that's not effective, then you may go to a request response. So being a little bit more direct and specific as to what you're expecting the child to do. So you may say, tell me what you want. And then you may move on to a partial verbal prompt. And this is really one of my favorites that I use a lot during language and communication skills and teaching, is give part of that expected response. I want to go, and then you wait. You may even give them the initial sound. I want a for cookie. That's more of a less intrusive prompt than giving them that full, I want a cookie. If they can take I want and fill in the rest, that's a good response. And then you move down to the physical prompt if necessary at that point. These are just great visuals that we're providing you guys to really use and to think about when you're teaching a skill for your child. So this is another response prompting strategies. Constant time delay. For your child or for your student, you may always provide a 4-second or a 5-second time delay before you provide that prompt. You always wait for that. A progressive time delay is you may start with a 2-second delay before you provide the prompt. And as they become independent with the skill, then you increase that time delay. So instead of a 2-second time delay, you then may wait 4 seconds before you provide them with that prompt. As you're teaching your skills, you want to think about prompt dependency, right? The more we do for our children and our students, without really thinking about our prompting and our prompting strategies, we could potentially be allowing them to be prompt dependent. They may know how to engage in the skill, but because we're always there to provide them with that prompt, they're not going to show us that independence with that skill. So these are all strategies that you can utilize. Simultaneous prompting. You may say, stop, and then you have a visual of stop. You may say, it's time for lunch, and you show a picture of lunch or the word for lunch, or you point to their schedule. You're using multiple prompts at the same time. We already talked about least to most and most to least prompting. The final response prompting strategy is the use of graduated guidance. And graduated guidance is often used for when you're teaching a task analysis or a chain. So we're going to talk a little bit about how do you prompt using graduated guidance. And as we go through it, I think a lot of you have utilized it without knowing that there is actually a term for prompting during a chain task or a skill that requires several steps. So graduated guidance is a prompting procedure that is used to teach skills that are task analyzed or chained and may require some physical assistance. So examples of these skills are hand washing, when you're teaching a child how to write certain writing tasks, you can use graduated guidance. Daily living things such as toothbrushing, Also following a schedule. With graduated guidance, we start with the most intrusive prompting, which could be the physical prompting, and then we systematically fade into a less intrusive, physically assisted prompts. So we may start with hand over hand, and then we move to a light touch on the elbow. So that's graduated guidance when you're teaching a skill. With graduated guidance, as the child continues to learn, you're there, you're shadowing, because you don't want them to make a lot of errors. So you're there to prompt as needed. And if the child isn't performing the steps independently, or they wait a little bit longer to perform the next step, you want to be there and ready to prompt them. Because really, the less errors they embed within that skill, that chain, the better. If they start making a lot of errors as they're completing that task, the more likely that they are going to engage in that same error the next time they are performing that skill. I have a joke with my friends that if I don't learn something errorlessly, then I keep making the same error. I'm not going to remember how to get to that house if I go the wrong way all the time. If I go the right way the first time, I'm less likely to make that error the next time. And then you provide verbal praise for best responses. So the best responses can be prompted or unprompted. It's really where your child is and how they're making progress. There's no right or wrong answer to that. If they're working hard and they're trying and you've gone from hand over hand to an elbow or a wrist touch for them to complete it, that's progress. So make sure that you remember to reinforce the child. So this is just a quick video. We love our hand washing, task analysis, and videos of a parent using graduated guidance to teach their child how to wash their hands.
Oh, look, you can wait on the blue one or the red one. All right, it's time to wash our hands.
Underneath the
Oh, you want the red one? The table. Oh, hold on, I think the elephant is here. So, oh, we got all of our friends' pictures. Oh, these guys are waiting so
Nice job, Ella.
So where in the prompt hierarchy was that child at in that video? Was the parent or the teacher using least to most or most to least, as well as thinking about the graduated guidance procedure? So in the video, the child was all over the place. And just from looking at it, the parent was using the most intrusive prompting, which was hand over hand. The parent was behind and guided her throughout all the steps. At one point, the little girl was looking around, and if the parent wasn't there to provide the prompt for that next step, she probably would have made an error. And so the teacher or the parent in that video made sure that they provided enough prompts so that the child wasn't making any errors. Any questions about graduated guidance, strategies that have been effective for your child in terms of prompting, or when you're teaching a skill that requires a lot of prompts? What are some strategies that you have used with your child or with your students? at any point in time, just really think about how you're prompting. If your child isn't making progress, then try some of the other prompting strategies to see if they're going to be effective. One prompting strategy that I didn't mention is the use of those visuals. And so you may refer back to a routine checklist to increase that learning and to increase the independence with your child. So the visual is also another type of prompting that you can utilize if you're teaching a chain or using task analysis to teach a skill. In order to increase independence and for learning to occur, we always have to remember to fade our prompts. Fading the level of supports, fading the level of prompting will increase your child's independence and with them mastering that skill. So prompt fading, I'm sure most or all of you have heard this before, is critical in the teaching phase. The child has mastered the skill. If you're still providing some level of prompting, you want to think about, how do I fade that prompt? So it's the process of systematically eliminating the stimulus and the response prompt. So the stimulus is, what do you provide to cue that behavior should occur? And the response is, what is pretty much the response, right? What are the action steps? What do you do if I present you with a demand? So it's systematically fading those prompts. If I give you a visual, can I fade those visuals out from 10 pictures to just one that has wash your hands, instead of all the pictures for get soap, turn on the water? Can I just now fade that to a picture for washing your hands? It could also mean decreasing the intensity or the intrusiveness of your prompting, or delaying the presentation of your prompt. So we talked about the different types of time delays. So making sure that you're utilizing all those strategies when you're teaching schedules, if you're teaching a task analysis, a chained steps, making sure that you're using those prompts, as well as you're fading your prompts as your child becomes independent.
So Marcy and Yvonne talked a lot about how we use schedules, how we use prompting strategies to help with students maintaining themselves on task, maintaining a routine, engaging in cooperative and participative behavior. However, you guys matter too. We don't want to overlook you as the teacher or the parent as a key person, a key role in that student's success with using these strategies. So remember, students, children, they watch us. They notice a lot of our nuances, and they pick up a lot of things that we are demonstrating. So it's important for us to recognize that while we're talking about how to do prompting and scheduling and how to train students to use these strategies, we're giving you nice, easy steps. We recognize that teaching students to use these strategies is not an easy task. And it's normal and it's natural, excuse me, if you might feel tense or frustrated sometimes, particularly in the beginning phases with transitioning youth to using these strategies and helping them improve their level of independence. So we're asking you to do a self-check when you are working with your students. Are you tense? Is your voice elevated? Are you frowning? Are you sighing? Look for little signs that tell you how you're doing with your teaching strategies. Other things that you might think about are your shoulders tight? Students of all levels notice our body language and they pick up cues from us. And that helps to influence how they'll respond and how they'll react to the strategies that we're trying to teach. So we want you to take that time to do a quick body scan. Notice, are any muscles tight in any parts of your body? Do you feel tense anywhere? Acknowledge your thoughts or emotions. Don't deny them. Don't ignore them. Acknowledge them. And then maybe take a quick breath sometimes when you feel yourself welling up with emotions yourself, because this is really challenging work. Take a breath, maybe take a longer pause break. Breathing moves oxygen around in your body so that you'll be able to think and respond instead of reacting. With a calmer demeanor and a renewed energy, your students' response to your directives should improve and they'll do much better with the learning.
Okay, so on this slide, we've listed some resources, and I did have a question in the chat about where are the slides available. As soon as this is over, we'll post them in that folder. We also have the 2 task analysis forms, the links to those that Yvonne used earlier in the presentation. We do also want to let you know about our Family Support Center and some of the services that we offer through the Family Support Center. Assistance with understanding the IEP process, access to disability-specific workshops, fairs, and conferences, assistance with preparing for your child's annual review. When buildings open, we do have a lending library. We provide assistance with understanding how to resolve disagreements and referrals to community resources. Our Family Support Center is comprised of Dr. Jayate, who is our instructional specialist, myself, Miss Young, who you heard tonight, who is our new social worker in our Family Support Office, and Cointa Velarde, who is our parent outreach specialist. And